So, anyone here speak German or know German at all? So you probably don't know what I'm saying when I say Lef, Schlenkerlo, Rausch, Bier, Krieg, Kolsch, and Alt. Alright, maybe this. What am I referring to when I say the game of quarters, pub crawls, and beer pong? Beer. I love beer. I know the majority of you are under 21, so you've probably never had beer before. Right? But I think this information might still interest you. So today, I'm going to tell you a little bit about beer, its history, some brewing methods, varieties, and health effects. The oldest proven records of brewing are about 6,000 years old, according to eatonline.net. It's recorded in the written history of ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. And there's actually a Sumerian prayer from that time to one of their goddesses that serves both as a prayer and as a way to remember the recipe for beer. Beer was spread through Europe by Germanic and Celtic tribes as far back as 3000 BC. And the early European beers might not be recognized as beer by most people today because they included ingredients such as fruit, honey, spices, and even narcotic drugs. Beer produced before the Industrial Revolution of the late 18th and early 19th centuries was made and sold on a domestic scale and was also being produced and sold by European monasteries. And during the Industrial Revolution, the production of beer moved from artisanal manufacture like in the monasteries to more of an industrial manufacture, and so the domestic ceased to be very significant by the end of the 19th century. According to the Barbarian's Beverage, A History of Beer in Ancient Europe, beer is the oldest and most widely consumed alcoholic beverage, and the third most popular drink after water and tea. Today, the brewing industry is a global business consisting of several multinational companies and thousands of smaller brew pubs and regional breweries. Beer sales are 4 times that of wine, which is the second most popular alcoholic beverage. Excuse me. The process of making beer is known as brewing and takes place in a brewery, although beer can still be made in the home, and that's referred to as home brewing. The purpose of brewing is to convert the starch source into a sugary liquid, which is called wort, and then that wort is then fermented into, by yeast into beer. Mixing the starch source with hot water is called mashing. That creates the wort, and this mashing process takes 1 to 2 hours. After that, the sweet wort is put into a kettle, or a copper as they're sometimes called, and then hops are added during the boiling in order to extract the bitterness, flavor, and aroma from them. And the longer the hops are in there being boiled, the more bitterness they create, but less of the hop flavor and aroma remains in the beer. Then the hopped wort is cooled and put into a fermenter where the yeast is then added. During the fermentation period, which requires 1 week to a number of months, depending on the type of yeast and the strength of the beer, it becomes beer. The traditional European brewing regions, which are mainly Germany, Belgium, the United Kingdom, Ireland, just to name a few of them, have many local varieties of beer. And in some countries such as ours, Canada, and Australia, brewers have adapted the European styles and made their own varieties. According to allaboutbeer.com, beer is categorized into 2 main types, which are pale lagers and ales, and then those 2 are further categorized into other varieties such as pale ale, stout, and brown ale. Lager production results in the lighter, cleaner tasting, drier beer, and pale lagers are the most commonly consumed beers in the world. Heineken, Budweiser, Coors, and Miller are typical examples of pale lagers. Lager is bottom fermented, whereas ale is top fermented, and the bottom and top refer to just where the yeast sits in the fermentation vessel. Top fermenting yeasts are often fermented at higher temperatures than the lager yeasts, and the resulting beer, which typically ends up being ales, are fruitier tasting. The malt in the beer determines the color of the beer. The most common color is the light amber, reddish, pale color, and that's produced from using pale malts. And darker beers are brewed from pale malts with some darker malt added to achieve the darker shade, and caramel is also used to darken beer. Very dark beers such as stout use dark malts alone, and Guinness is a good example of that. Now, the alcohol content. Beer ranges from less than 3% alcohol to 30%, which is close to the strength of a vodka. The pale lagers fall in the range of 4 to 6%, same with the ales. And some beers, such as table beer, are actually of such a low alcohol content that they're served in schools in some of the British schools. So finally, I'll tell you some about the health effects of beer. AllAboutBeer.com states that moderate consumption of alcohol, and you mainly hear about this with wine, but it includes beers associated with a decreased risk of cardiac disease, stroke, and cognitive decline. Brewer's yeast is known to be a rich source of nutrients. Therefore, beer can contain good amounts of magnesium, selenium, potassium, phosphorus, vitamin B, and biotin. Beer is actually sometimes referred to as liquid bread for those reasons. A 2005 Japanese study even found that low-alcohol beer might possess strong anti-cancer properties. On the other hand, the long-term effects of alcohol abuse include the risk of developing alcoholism, alcohol liver disease, and some forms of cancer. So after telling you a bit about the history, brewing methods, varieties, and effects of beer, I hope that once you are of the age to drink it, you'll enjoy it. You'll enjoy this and appreciate the ancient beverage. I know I will when I have a few to celebrate passing the class.
All right. All the structural stuff is fine. You know, you've got the intro, preview, thesis statement, the content issues. Those are all good. You got a lot of research into the presentation. You cite it well. So all that's pretty solid. So the presentation things are the only things that we're going to worry about here because, like I said, the structural stuff is all really good. Some things I think you're doing pretty well. You have one of the things that you do with your voice is you use understatement as a way of getting an idea across to something. Drop your voice. Like you have in the introduction, you're talking about, you know, someday when you're older, you know, you'll be able to, you know, have a beer. I'm sure most of you haven't had that, you know, that kind of thing. Instead of going overboard on it, you kind of, you know, step back a little bit. And I think that works pretty well. You need to do more of that in the speech. It's more of that variety, I think, would be helpful. You project really well. I think you've got pretty good variety, but I think that understatement could be used a little bit more. It's pretty fluid in the presentation, but you do have you go at such a regular pace when you're delivering it that it does come across a little bit, not quite reading, but it's, you know, it needs personality. And you've got places where there's personality in the introduction and the conclusion, but you need to get more of that in the rest of the speech too. And I think that'll make it a little bit more interesting. Now the body movement thing, I think this is kind of interesting because you do move around a little bit. You look a little bit more comfortable, but you do also do a couple of things that are a bit distracting. You're going to watch this on YouTube, and you're going to see yourself crossing your legs funny a couple of times, and you look a little sideways sometimes. And that's something I think that you could adjust to. But there's nothing wrong with changing, you know, the fact that you are, you know, holding your weight on one leg or the other. You're not swaying a lot. It's just that seemed to be the one nervous thing that you had. And then also maybe being a little script dependent. When you looked up, you were fine talking to us all, but you did not look up a lot, you know, because you really are into the script there. And so I think that's a little bit of a problem. All right. Thank you. That gets us to the end of our speech.